Hiya, my name is Jay and welcome to the channel. Today we're back in Bumi Reptile Sanctuary for our second to last episode actually. We've been working in this park since I've started my YouTube channel. Well, started properly anyways, and we've introduced pretty much every single reptile into the game. But as you may have noticed, we're still missing a few. And that's why in today's episode, we're introducing 17 new species. Yes, you did hear that right. We're introducing 17 whole new species, so that's going to be pretty cool, I think. So, we're not going to waste too much time, we're just going to get right into it. But just a quick note, I know it's been a while since my last upload. That was primarily because I did have some work stuff to do, and because I did try filming this episode, recording the voiceover for this episode beforehand, and didn't quite pan out, so I'm just doing this a second time now, and hopefully it comes across a little bit better. And yeah, let's get into the meat of it. So, what we're building today is, in fact, probably my largest speed build in Bumi Reptile Sanctuary, and it is a large tropical reptile, amphibian, and invertebrate house. So, we're going to be housing loads and loads of small little critters, ranging from, little tiny bugs all the way to huge snakes, so that's kind of what the purpose of this building is, as well as hosting a variety of tropical plants. So it's meant to kind of emulate the feel of being deep in a rainforest where you can barely even see the sky because of all the tree canopy cover, and there'll be lots of mist and foliage all around you, and it's going to feel really humid, and I just kind of wanted to emulate that vibe. You do have buildings like these in zoos, where you go into a reptile house and it's made to feel all tropical and cool like that, so that was kind of my idea for this, and I wanted it to look really unique and stand out in the park, like a big central, not really central, but a landmark of sorts, so you can kind of see it from other parts of the park, and when you see it, you're like, oh, what's that? That looks pretty cool, let's go there. So that was kind of my vibe and the idea I was going for, and I think it turned out pretty cool. I'm using a lot of new techniques here, which I haven't used before. Mainly, I'm making use of art shapes, which I haven't used in my park before this. Art shapes do come with the game. They're just essentially really basic shapes, squares, rectangles, with a really basic kind of matte texture to them. And so I'm using an almost black color for this, and I decided to just kind of go with my gut. I didn't really plan out the building. I kind of made it up as I went along. And I think it looks really cool. There's lots of really nice curves to it. I sort of made it... I initially kind of wanted to do a dome, but then I thought a shape like this would be a bit more unique, a bit more interesting. So the whole front of the building is a flat sheet of glass, and then it kind of curves out from there with these really nice curves that kind of end at sharp edges. So I thought it looked really modern, and I was very happy with how it turned out. I'll let the video kind of speak for itself when it comes to the building, because the techniques I use are more visual than I am able to really explain, so as you go along you'll be able to see what I really did and how it panned out as this really cool building. And I am really, really happy with it. I think it's such a great final build for this park. It really exemplifies what Bumi Reptile Sanctuary is all about, having these reptiles in a naturalistic environment where people can experience them. And yeah. Speaking of the animals, let's actually get into them. So like I said, we have 17 new species that we're introducing today. These range from reptiles to amphibians to invertebrates. And as for reptiles, we actually have 4 different reptile species, and these are the last 4. We have 2 snakes and 2 lizards. Now the first snake that we're going to be talking about hails from South America. It's pretty big. It's pretty long. That's what she said. That's more what I said. Oh, let's just ignore that and move on. It is pretty big, and you may have heard of it. You may have actually heard of its far more famous or infamous cousin. Yes, that's right. I am in fact talking about the yellow anaconda. Now, when it comes to yellow anacondas, they're pretty big. They're one of the biggest snakes in the world. Not quite as big as the green anaconda, not quite as hefty, but they still grow up to about 15 feet, and some have been reported to be even longer than that. So very, very impressive animals. They grow up to 55 kilograms and are found generally throughout Paraguay in South America or Paraguay. And I think they're amazing animals. I personally would really like to see a green anaconda in the game, but the yellow anaconda is pretty damn cool too. I absolutely love the patterning. It's a beautiful, beautiful patterning on it. The colors are so striking. They're this gorgeous lemony yellow color with like flecks of green and these deep, almost black splotches and stripes across the body. And very, very appealing animals. And they are found in the reptile pet trade throughout the world, but they're not super popular generally because they're quite aggressive animals. Speaking of the pet trade, that's kind of where our next animal comes in. The common boa constrictor. So, boa constrictors are, for me anyways, a bit more of a surprise to have appeared in this game. They're a lot more of a pet than a zoo animal anyways, in my opinion anyways. I thought they were pretty cool that they were in the game. I do really like these animals. They're found throughout tropical, North, Central and South America. And they're pretty big as well. They're relatively hefty, especially for a snake that you do find in the pet trade more often. They get up to about 10 feet, though I believe the longest confirmed was about 14 feet, which is, a pretty exceptional individual. And one of the really cool things about these snakes is that they give birth to live young, unlike a lot of other snakes which, lay eggs. So that's pretty cool. I would like to actually get one of these as a pet one day. I'm a big fan of the reptile pet hobby. I haven't got any reptiles myself just because I'm not in a permanent place and I want to make sure I do have a permanent place before getting pets. But yeah, I would love to have a boa constrictor one day. They just seem amazing. Their temperament's great. I've got the chance to handle them in the past and they're just super lovely animals. So yeah, one day. Anyways, that's the end of the snakes that we're going to be introducing today. Now let's talk about lizards. So we're introducing the last two kind of reptiles into this zoo, which are our two lizards. The first one is endemic to the Lesser Antilles and is our Lesser Antillean iguana. These are a super interesting species which I've not actually heard of before this game came out, which is kind of crazy. I never knew this iguana existed. I was obviously familiar with its more famous cousin, which we'll talk about in a second. But these guys are a lot more blocky, a lot more like stocky animals. They're like really dark grey and you can get them in shades up to almost white. Unfortunately, they are critically endangered, which is really unfortunate. They are on the IUCN Red List. But thankfully, they are now legally protected throughout their habitat. Hopefully, enforcement does keep up that protection. And generally, they are threatened by habitat loss, agriculture, things like that, and introduction of things like dogs and cats into their native range. But overall, very, very interesting animal, really, really fascinating. One of those animals that I think is a great addition to the game because it is critically endangered, so captive breeding is a great help, and also because they're just not that well known as an animal, so it's nice to bring awareness to more people on a bit of a larger scale about animals like this. Moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about this Lesser Antillean iguana's much more famous cousin, the green iguana. So these are large, arboreal, mostly herbivorous lizards. So you do see these guys in the pet trade all the time. So they're way too popular for what they are. They're really big and they're really cool animals. I'm not like dissing them or anything, I still really like them, but they just do not make good pets. So if any one of you are interested in getting into the reptile hobby, getting a pet reptile, I do not recommend iguanas. They just take a lot of work. They need massive habitats. They need so much food. They're just not that well, they don't have the best temperament, so it is difficult to take care of them in captivity. But in a setting like a zoo like we have here, they do work pretty well. So yeah, I do find them pretty interesting. Another interesting fact is they are invasive to certain areas of the world. So in the US and Florida, they've been finding iguanas in places they shouldn't be. Fiji. These guys are native to South America, so they shouldn't be in these places. And I actually have a theory that iguanas may be invasive to Southeast Asia. I don't have an awful lot of backing to this theory. I'm not sure if anyone has done any studies on it. But growing up, I remember seeing a lot of green iguanas in the wild here in Malaysia and in some adjacent countries like Singapore. And in fact, the last one I saw was in Singapore this year, just randomly chilling on a rooftop, like a fully grown adult male green iguana just chilling on a rooftop in Singapore, like, you know, without a care in the world. And I'm like, dude, you are on the other side of the planet from where you should be, you know? Like, where did you come from? How did you get yourself in this situation? So I'm not sure if they're actually invasive here or if I've only seen a few random individuals, but, you know, hopefully someone does some research on that one day. If any of you are, you know, budding wildlife researchers, here's a topic for you. If you ever want to, you know, randomly visit Malaysia and look at some iguanas, yeah, feel free. I'm sure that's a very strange request, but yeah, go for it, you know. So, next on our list, we are moving on to our amphibians now that we're done with all our reptiles. And our first amphibian is a chunky boy. Like, the chunkiest boy we've talked about in this part. So chunky, in fact, that they're about the size of a cat. Can you imagine that? Like, that level of chunk? It's pretty impressive. Now, these guys are the largest frog on Earth, and I don't know if you've guessed their name yet, but if you haven't, these are the Goliath frog, or African bush frog, I believe they're also called, or African Goliath frog. These guys are huge. They reach the size of a cat, essentially. 3 kilograms, they're heavy animals, pretty chunky, like I said. They're normally found near fast-flowing rivers with sandy bottoms, generally across the middle African countries, so things like Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, that sort of thing. An interesting thing about these frogs is that they don't produce mating calls. So a lot of other frogs and toads, they're really famous for their croaks, obviously, because that's how they attract mates. But these guys don't do that, so I'm not sure how they actually find mates. They probably just waddle around until they bump into another one, you know? So yeah. Unfortunately, these guys are a little bit threatened. They're threatened mainly by hunting, because where they are, there's a lot invested into the bushmeat trade, where these guys are looked at as a source of food. So that's a little bit unfortunate on these guys' parts, because they're really cool animals. And in fact, large frogs like these are another thing that I want to one day have as a pet. So like a Pac-Man frog or a pixie frog, which are very similar to these guys. And I think one day that would be pretty cool to have. So yeah, just so you guys know as well, they are definitely found in the pet trade. And again, one thing to note about the pet trade is I'd like to just make sure that people know that if you're getting a reptile or amphibian, make sure it's captive bred. That just does so much better for wild populations. Moving on to our next amphibian, we have the Lehman's tree frog. Now, these guys are unfortunately critically endangered, but they are so beautiful. Like, you can just look at the colors and you can tell these guys are gorgeous, gorgeous frogs. And the reason they're so brightly colored is actually because that protects them from predators. This is called aposematic coloration. So if a predator were to look at this guy and see the bright colors, they're going to be like, ooh, that's looking a little bit too bright for me, a little bit dangerous. I think I'm not going to go eat you. It's a warning sign. It shows the predators that this guy is full of toxins, and if you eat him, you're not going to have a good time. These guys are found only in a very small area of Colombia, and thankfully they are fully protected in the native country, but there are still threats to them. Habitat loss is still a threat, so, you know, fingers crossed it doesn't get too bad. And once again, these guys are also collected for the pet trade, which is not sustainable. So once again, if you want to get a pet amphibian or reptile, make sure it is captive bred and not collected from wild populations. It's just so much more, it's just better in every sort of sense of the word, really. And there's lots of cool videos on YouTube talking about that topic if you want to learn more. Our next frog is another poison dart frog, which is the golden poison dart frog. These guys are pretty cool. They're native also to Colombia. And let's talk a little bit about why they're called poison dart frogs and what their poisons are actually like. These guys are covered in an alkaloid toxin, which is a poison that essentially shuts down your nervous system. So if you eat one of these frogs by accident, I don't know how you'd eat a frog by accident, but if you do, this is what will happen. Your nerves will shut down. You can't transmit impulses, and your muscles won't be able to contract. And guess what? Your heart's a muscle, so your heart's going to shut down, and you'll probably die of heart failure. So that's a lesson, you guys. Don't go out there and eat poison dart frogs. They're probably not even that tasty. Oh god. But yeah, another cool thing is that they get these toxins from food sources in their wild. So interestingly, if you keep them in captivity and you raise them in captivity without this food source, they won't accumulate the toxin and they'll actually end up being pretty harmless, which I thought was super fascinating. So I'd imagine most of the frogs in captivity are not given access to that sort of food source, so they're all pretty chill. Now we're done with our amphibians, let's move on to our invertebrates, starting with the guy on screen, our giant land tiger snail. Now, these guys are pretty cool, not too much to say about them except they're the largest land snail. They can be kept as pets sometimes, and they're just big chunky boys, you know. They're slimy little rabbits with shells, which I know is a very strange description, but if you look at videos of these guys, their little eye stalks look like rabbit ears. Oh god, I must sound like a complete weirdo. But, I mean, yeah, snails, they're cool. They are also considered a bit of a dangerous invasive species risk, and oftentimes they're confiscated at airports. I don't know why people would try to smuggle snails, but yeah, apparently they get confiscated at airports surprisingly often. So yeah, there you guys go. Don't smuggle snails. A lot of weird advice in this one, isn't there? Anyways, let's move on. Now we're going on to our Spidey boys, our spiders, starting with our Mexican red-kneed tarantula. These guys are pretty large spiders, with adult females going over 2 inches and males growing over 3 inches long. That's in terms of leg span. They're very beautiful animals. You know, these are like the quintessential tarantula, if you will. You see them on the covers of like children's science textbooks and stuff because they're just so vividly colored. And an interesting thing is these guys are commonly kept as pets. They're pretty docile. They're very unlikely to bite humans. And in the wild, they're not overly threatened, but it does seem that individuals that are being caught nowadays seem to be shrinking in size, probably due to their habitats shrinking as well. Moving on to our next tarantula, if I can remember its very long name, is the pink salmon bird-eating tarantula, which is the third largest tarantula in the world, actually, with a leg span of up to 11 inches. That's very impressive, actually. They're pretty hefty animals. And when threatened, these guys have a cool behavior where they raise their legs in the air as well as the front of their bodies, kind of like how a cobra puffs up its hood and raises its front of its body as well. So it kind of just scares off predators like that. And if the attacker continues to kind of encroach on them, the tarantula can then turn around and use its back legs to flick these really irritating, painful hairs that it has on its butt at the attacker. And apparently those can be quite an irritant, quite painful, even for humans, so. But the moral of that is, the moral of the story, no, I meant just the takeaway is that these guys are very unlikely to bite and will resort to all these other defenses first before actually going ahead and biting its attacker. So, yeah, there's the tarantulas for you. And now we're moving on to the largest tarantula and the largest spider in the world, the Goliath bird eater. Now these guys are big. They're, as far as mass goes, they're nearly 200 grams and nearly 30 centimeters in terms of leg span. I'm really off with the whole metric and imperial system, aren't I? I'm just like skipping back and forth between them. But yeah, anyways, these guys, some cool things about them is they don't actually eat birds like as a regular staple. That's potentially an urban legend. There is a story that, the first person who saw them eating a dead bird. So maybe that's how it got about. So they do eat birds, but not like as a staple food source. They eat all sorts of small animals like lizards, mice. And they're native to northern South America, so in rainforest regions. And a cool thing is that during mating, the females don't eat the males. So in a lot of insects and vertebrates like praying mantises and other arachnids as well, like other spiders, the females end up eating the males during mating, which I'm sure is not fun for the male at all. but not in this case. So, you know, good on you, like bird-eating tarantulas. You do you. Don't eat your mates. Very nice. Next up on our list of spiders, we have the Brazilian wandering spider. Now, these guys can grow up to something like 6 inches long, so about 15 centimeters in terms of leg span again. And they're called wandering spiders because they just kind of wander the forest floor at night, and sometimes they wander into human settlements, which is not too great considering these guys are pretty venomous as well, and they like to hide in dark, moist areas, so like people's shoes, which again, not 100% ideal, I would say. But these guys, overall, very interesting spiders. The pink salmon name, I believe, comes from the coloration of their head region, but I'm not too sure about that, so take that statement with a bit of a grain of salt. Moving on to our beetles, we have our first beetle, which is the Titan beetle. And our Titan beetles are one of the largest beetles in the world. The largest measured specimen, I believe, was about 6 to 7 inches long, so about 17 centimeters or so. And these guys are pretty cool. They can actually still fly despite how big they are, because the beetles, they do have those wings underneath their wing sheaths. And the cool thing about these guys as well is that they've got really sharp mandibles that have been known to snap pencils in half. Don't know why you'd feed pencils to a beetle, but you do you. And another cool thing is that they've never found the larvae of these guys, so we don't know what they look like as babies. So once again, any budding wildlife researchers, you guys want to go on a mission to hunt down the larvae of the Titan beetle, go for it. Take a trip down to Venezuela and see what you can find, you know. Lots of things waiting to be discovered out there. Next up on our list, we have Goliath beetles, and these guys are beautiful. They look like the panda of the beetle world because of their lovely black and white markings. They are pretty big as well. They measure up to about 4.5 inches or so at the largest. And they're a member of the scarab family. So, you know, scarabs like the, you know, super famous Egyptian scarabs and things like that. And you can find these guys kind of around western to eastern equatorial Africa. So that kind of belt around the middle of Africa. And yeah, pretty cool animals. Very, very interesting. Next up, we have our Asian giant forest scorpion. These guys are some of the largest living species of scorpions, and they're just very, very interesting. They're actually native to where I'm from in Malaysia, but I've never seen one in the wild as of yet. One really cool thing is they're not super venomous. If they sting people, it's relatively mild. Some people say it feels like a cat scratch with some inflammation afterwards, but nothing fatal at all. And because they're so cool, like in terms of not being toxic, being pretty big, and relatively being chill scorpions, they make pretty good pets as well. And another cool thing is that unlike other scorpions or insects, you can keep them in small groups in captivity, which is quite cool. Moving on, we're going on to another type of lizard, which is... did I just say lizard? I meant insect. We're going on to the giant burrowing cockroach, which are native to Australia and found in tropical parts of Queensland. These guys are not like most insects, which commonly lay eggs. They in fact lay live young. They give birth to live young. So again, very interesting animals, and they can live up to about 10 years, so pretty impressive for an insect. And they don't actually have wings like other cockroaches, so they can't fly. They just kind of chill in the dirt, which sounds like a great existence, you know, just chilling in the dirt, enjoying life. Very cool. Next on our list is probably my favorite out of the invertebrates that we have, and a very cool invertebrate, the giant Amazonian centipede. Centipedes have to be some of the most badass animals on the planet. They're just so cool. Like, just look at them. They're a little bit terrifying, I do admit, but they're very cool. This species specifically can get up to 30 centimeters or 12 inches, which is, wow, that's super impressive. They are like opportunistic carnivores, so they essentially eat anything they can overpower and kill. So small lizards, other insects, of course. And some really large individuals have actually been known to eat bats. So they climb up onto cave ceilings and they can dangle off and grab bats mid-flight. That is insane. Like, I've never heard of an animal doing something so impressive as catching a bat mid-flight to eat. That is just bonkers, you know. And with that, we are actually done with all the animals we're going to introduce today. You'll be able to see them in the cinematics at the end of the video. And yeah, let's just talk a little bit more about this build and what's next. So like I said, I was really happy with this build by the end. I think it looks really great, and you can see it from lots of different parts of the park. One thing I did have to do was I had to relocate the Aldabra giant tortoise habitat, because that was like right in front of this building and I wanted a bit more of an open entrance. So I relocated that whole habitat to next to where this new building is. So it's kind of like slightly incorporated into it, with some areas directly viewing the new tortoise habitat, and also made that habitat a walkthrough one, so guests can go in and hang out with tortoises if they want to. And otherwise, I think there's not much else to say about the building itself. I think the video has probably shown off how it looks. I think it looks great. Again, I wanted it to be viewable from all areas of the park, so I do have cinematics from different parts of the park, like the watchtower, where if you go up you can actually see the building in the distance, which I really liked. And since this was the last speed build episode of Bumi Reptile Sanctuary, we only have one full episode to go, which will be a tour of the whole zoo, or the whole park. What I want to do for that is I might do a live tour, so while I'm actually playing the game I might record my voiceover. The reason I haven't been doing that much is because of my frame rate. It does go down quite significantly, but I think if I keep the game paused, I should be able to show you around the park without too much of a loss in frame rate, and it should be like, actually watchable. So I'll probably do that. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to see how far this park has come. And yeah, I can't believe we're almost at the end of this. This park has been like basically around since I started playing Planet Zoo, which is kind of insane. And I've really enjoyed playing it, and I'm really excited to start a new project. I think before that final episode though, I might do just a mini episode where I go around the park, tidy things up, plant new trees, just to fill in all the gaps, put in lighting, because I have neglected lighting a lot, just add benches, bins, anything I've forgotten along the way, so that when we do get to our final tour episode, everything is in place and we can have a look at what the park is like fully completed. And once that's done, I will put it on the workshop. In fact, today I will probably try and get this building, this tropical rainforest house, on the workshop as well, so that you guys can have a play with it. And yeah, that's about it for today. Please do leave a comment if you have any suggestions, or if you just want to let me know about this episode. Tell me what your favorite animal out of today's bunch is, these 17. They're pretty cool, and if I had to choose a favorite, it would probably be the yellow anaconda. And out of just the invertebrates, like I said, it would be the centipede, because they're cool. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the building as well. And let me know what you think my next series is going to be, because I am very excited to reveal that at some point. It won't be too long from now. Please do subscribe if you like this content and you want to see more. And I'm going to go full YouTuber and tell you to hit that bell for notifications if you want to know when I upload next, because even I don't know when I'm going to upload next, because life's a little bit crazy sometimes. And thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who subscribed. It really does make my day hearing the little notification from my YouTube app. So thank you so much. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!